In this video segment, we are going to talk about the software and then demonstrate some of the basic programming for Connected Component Workbench. Rockwell software has evolved from the legacy equipment dictating the software that is used to program the device. For example, if you had a SLC 500, then you would have to use RS Logix 500 software. Rockwell then progressed to the original release of RS Logix 5000, which is now split into two separate platforms. The newest platforms are Studio 5000 and Connected Components Workbench. For this training video, we are going to focus on the Connected Components Workbench software, or CCW as it is more commonly referred to. We are going to talk about downloading and uploading, as well as the mode switch on Allen Bradley PLCs. In CCW, you have a primary project organizer that has four key elements. The first element is program, where the actual logic is written and executed. The execution of those programs is strictly based on the position they are listed inside the project. For example, program 1 will be fully executed and then it will continue to program 2. The next element is global variables. Global variables show any tag that is stored in the PLC and can be used within any of the programs. They can also be referenced from the HMI. The next element is user-defined function blocks. Some people refer to this as add-on instructions, and that term comes from the Studio 5000 software. But the user-defined function block makes it so that you can develop a custom code snippet that could be executed multiple times or called upon within your program. The last element is data types. Data types shows you all of the system variables, but it also provides a place for you to add your own data type. When you want to transfer your program, there are two different options that we need to cover because it is different between which platforms you are working with. Rockwell software always uses the terminology of download versus upload. Downloading is compiling the connected components file and storing that information into the Micro 800 PLC. Uploading is taking that information that has already been stored in the controller and reconstructing the project in your laptop. Doing a download will break the communications and override the instructions that are inside the controller. So typically, if you are walking up to an existing system, you only want to upload. Upload is the safest thing unless you know that the controller has lost its program and you have to take the offline file from your laptop and download it into the processor. The mode switch has three possible positions. The first position is run, which means the processor executes but no online editing or program downloads or firmware flashing is allowed. This is considered the most secure mode of operation since it can only be modified with someone physically at the device. The second position is program, which means the processor does not execute the logic and the outputs are de-energized. This mode is typically used for program downloads or firmware flashing, but it also requires someone to be physically present in order to change the mode. The third position, and the most common, is remote, which means the mode can be changed from the software to remote program for downloading purposes or remote run, which allows the logic to execute and online editing. Let's go over a typical PLC application. As you can see here, we have two solenoid valves that are going to fill ingredients into a tank, and the tank has two level sensors. There is also a mixing motor inside the tank and a solenoid valve at the bottom that we can control in order to drain the tank once we've completed our process. The first thing you want to do when evaluating a new system is to identify what states you have for your individual devices. We've gone through and identified it for each of your outputs. For example, solenoid 1 will be on in the event that solenoid 3 is off and sensor 1 is off and we remain in auto. But it turns off if solenoid 3 or sensor 1 turn on. The sequence of operations is typically the next step, where you will take the conditions that you know will drive your outputs and put those into a logical sequence of events. For our example, solenoid 1 turns on until sensor 1 turns on. This will trigger our next step in the sequence, which will turn on solenoid 2 as well as the motor. Both of those will stay on until sensor 2 gets turned on. And when sensor 1 and sensor 2 are on, we will then open the dump valve, which is solenoid 3. Solenoid 3 is then going to stay on for an additional 10 seconds after sensor 1 turns off so that it will drain the remaining bits of the tank. Lastly, our system must remain in auto for the sequence to execute properly. When first creating a project in CCW, you need to set up the configuration in the PLC. This can be done by double-clicking the controller in the project organizer. This will bring up all the potential configurations for the controller. We will use the software to demonstrate some of the most common and important properties. There are 4 key steps for downloading inside CCW. From our taskbar on the top, you will select the drop-down and then select the Connect button. Once you select Connect, you will then set up your connection path and it will give you a prompt to ask if you would like to download or upload. You will select the Download button, which gives you another pop-up window. In this window, you will have 2 options. Option 1 is to just download, and option 2 is to download with project values. Download on its own will override any of the logical conditions that you have changed, whereas download with project values will do a download and then store any of the initial or project values that you have stored on your laptop's backup or your offline project. The last step compiles and finishes the download and asks if you would like to return the controller into run mode. Now you are in a connected state, which means you are now online with the controller and able to see live conditions. In CCW, you do not need to make sure that you have the same software and firmware revisions in order to download to a controller, as long as the firmware of the controller is newer or at the same level of your software. Uploading in CCW is done by going to the initial startup or splash screen and selecting the button called Discover. Once you hit the Discover button, it will open up FactoryTalk Link software, which allows you to browse to the device, pick the device, and select Upload. When you use this method, it will take everything from the controller and bring it up into your project, regardless of the firmware or what the number or part number of the device is. There is a second method to uploading from a controller, which is used when you have an existing project. You can open the existing project and select Upload on the controller to allow you to store the current project values from the PLC into your offline project. In the event that you created a project and selected the wrong firmware or the wrong hardware, then you will get an error. Therefore, the preferred method is always using the Discover method.